So I'm actually here with my good friend and longtime business partner, Anthony Martinez.
How are you?
We're on our way to look at a property that we just put under contract on Friday in the southwest coast of Florida, which is a very, very high growth, up and coming area, and we're gonna go check it out. But as we're driving up, Anthony, we've been having this conversation, right, where, because we've been doing this for so long, and because we know our numbers and we have the experience, we actually put this property under contract about 3 days ago, sight unseen. We haven't even seen this property, and now it's actually the first time we're going to go see it. And again, that just comes from our experience. We've been doing this a long time, and we know how to underwrite the numbers, how to evaluate the market, and everything like that. But I just kind of wanted to ask you, like, what's your philosophy when it comes to acquisitions and evaluating, whether it's the property, whether it's the market, the city, the neighborhood, if you want to share some of that.
Absolutely. I'm always looking at growth. So I want to be in cities where people are moving to. Those are easy statistics you can find on uhaul.com. You can find throughout the internet. You know that the state of Florida has the largest net moving migration in the U.S.
Yeah, and it's you mentioned uhaul.com, right? Like, why uhaul.com? Because if you think about it logically, that tells you where people are moving, right? Because when people are relocating, what do? They rent a truck. They have to move their stuff from one house to the next. And so those numbers can be very helpful. I bet you, that's a huge nugget right there that I bet a lot of people don't even think about, and the other thing is, obviously, where I find in my experience, because, we do a lot of, mentoring and coaching and training people. And I see this a lot where people get analysis paralysis, right? Where, they'll go through all the steps, they'll research the area, they'll analyze the deal, but then they're afraid to pull the trigger. They're afraid to make an offer. They're afraid to make a mistake. They think that it's going to be the end of the world. And before you know it, the deal passes them by, right? And so, again, this property, we bought it sight unseen. And this, we've done this many times. And I don't know, what advice do you have for someone that's sort of like on the fence, that, they're like, listen, I want to get into real estate investing. I've been studying it for years. I have, I've paid for this mentorship, that mentorship. I've watched, thousands of hours of YouTube tutorials, but yet, they're afraid to take that next step, take that leap. What would you say to someone like that?
Yeah, that trepidation's normal. 25 years ago, when we jumped into the mortgage business, it wasn't something that we did willingly. We actually took our time. We studied. We talked to other people. We didn't want to leave our cush 9-to-5 job. That was a big move. Mentorship, aligning yourself with the right person that can help you underwrite that deal, mitigate the risk so that you are more comfortable in doing what you do. And if you go through an entire flip and you broke even or you lost $1, it's something that you learn along that process. The next one that you do, you may offer $10,000 less to give you a little bit more of that cushion. How many deals have we bought sight unseen? Probably in the upper dozens.
Yeah.
Now, if we totally are putting ourselves out there with no inspection period, that's a different beast. But there are opportunities where you can take a look during your inspection period. So you're not limited to locking in that deal 3-4 days later. You lock it in, you take a look, and then you have time to say yay or nay. If the numbers make sense, you can even renegotiate that price for those numbers to make sense on the deal. One of the ways we look at and we assess risk, we look at what the ARV of that property is. We look at what the rehab is. Whatever you think the rehab is, add 10% on top. And if you're good, you'll hit that number. Then you go into, what is it going to cost me to sell this property? Well, you have real estate commissions. There's strategies nowadays where you can pay to buy down the buyer's rate. That's going to give them a more affordable price, a more palatable payment. One of the other things that you have is understanding what the holding costs are. You might be using money from your line of credit. You might be using money from your self-directed IRA.
Hard money.
You might be using hard money. Each one of those options has a different cost of that money. And we're not talking about opportunity cost. We're talking about the cost of that money. Once you see that number in between, that VIG, that's what you expect to make. If your target is to make 15%, shoot for 20. Make your offer based on 20. If not, massage the numbers, make it work. If you need to draw back on that $4 tile and install $2 tile, you got to do it. You're going to find a buyer if you're priced right. And that's one of the biggest nuggets I would say is price the property right. Don't try to go all the way to the ceiling. Look at the ceiling and say, I want to be right under it. Therefore, I have a competitive advantage.
Right. And, that's something that we always talk about, right? Like you make your money when you buy, right? So you have to buy at the right price. But like you're saying, in order to know what the right price to buy is, you got to start from the end in mind, right?
Correct.
So when you're saying ARV is your after repair value, is the price that, that you think you could sell it for. And what you're saying is perfectly right. If you think that the top market for a particular property is, let's just say $300,000, be a little more conservative. Price it out at, let's say $290,000, $295,000, because now you're more competitive. The property more than likely will sell faster, and then start working backwards from there. And that's where you have to know your budget, how much is it going to cost to renovate the house, to do all the rehab, which includes your cost of materials, your cost of labor, and everything that comes with the construction side of it. And like you mentioned too, right, the cost of money. So you always have to calculate the cost of money. So if it's going to cost me $10,000 in interest alone, plus closing costs, insurance, taxes, all these different things, you have to include that in that number and start backing it out from that top number. And then once you say, okay, these are my total costs and I want to make a margin of 15, 20, 30% on this deal, that means that I got to offer X. And then that's when you're really making your money, when you're able to negotiate your purchase price at that number where you need to be, so that when you do get to the point where you're ready to sell, you've already covered all your expenses and your costs. One of the things that I did, I remember my first flip, like my first rehab flip. I've always been, I come from the finance and the legal world. So, I know numbers, I know contracts, I can negotiate a deal, but I didn't know anything about construction at the time. I wasn't too familiar with construction costs. I wasn't familiar with material costs. I could calculate my cost of money, and I knew how to negotiate the deal with certain provisions like you mentioned earlier to make sure you have enough time and protection within the contract. But once we closed, I didn't know construction. So what I did personally was I partnered up with a GC, a contractor, who someone I knew, and I approached them about doing a joint venture. And what I did was I brought in the hard money financing. So I was able to get the hard money loan on the property, and he came in with just the difference to cover the remaining portion of the rehab amount, and we did an equity share, 50-50. Said, look, I don't care that, it's just 50-50. I just want to learn. And I was with him every step of the way. Okay, how much is it for, the cost of tiles? How much are the cabinets? How much are the countertops? How much are the vanities? How much is the paint? How much is, and I started learning how to put together a budget for the rehab. So the moral of the story there is I partnered up with someone that had the experience already that I could learn from at the same time. And, that was my first one. Since then, done well over 150 rehabs. Now we're doing, large scale ground up construction projects, right? Multi-million-dollar projects. And so you got to start somewhere, right? And learn from other people. So it's important to surround yourself with those type of people.
And where you mentioned partnering up with a GC,
we've partnered up on a lot of deals together.
Absolutely. And having a GC or a project manager, that mitigates your risk. That person wants to get in, get out, get their money back, get their guys back working on other projects. Your
goals are aligned, because you're not just paying some GC that, takes your money and runs.
Correct.
He's putting his own money in because he sees the big picture. He understands that it's going to make more money on the sale of the property and the profit of the deal than just taking your money and then, dragging out a project for an extra 6 months. So you always have to make sure that whoever you partner with, you're your goals, you're aligned, you know,
Right.
you're in alignment.
And there's so many more resources today than when you and I started,
Yeah.
where you can access contractors through Thumbtack. Thumbtack is an app that I use.
I use it all the time.
Yeah, I've got dozens of contractors that I work with, but I know that I can go to Thumbtack, I can take pictures of my problem, I can upload it right onto their app, easy as can be, and I can get back 2 or 3 bids or calls to discuss the project. And that is an amazing resource. Say Angie's List maybe was around, not that we ever used it, but Angie's List was around. This is a
Yeah, I've
simplified
always
version
been a
of that.
Thumbtack guy, but yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So
And it's a free,
it's absolutely
yeah.
free.
So, you know, and then I think, you know, in closing, one of the other things that I want to just kind of mention is the fact that, a lot of people, you know, have that, like you said, that trepidation, that fear to get started, right? What creates that analysis paralysis. And a big part of that is that they're listening to people around them. And it's like, well, you don't know what you're doing. Like, why would you do that? You're going to lose your money. I know so-and-so that lost their money. Or, you know, and then, so what happens is, you know, you're surrounded with the people in your immediate vicinity who haven't done it. And so they're projecting their limiting beliefs and their own fears onto you.
Absolutely.
And so the way to get around that is to, you know, find other people that are already doing it, that have successfully done it, and that have a different perspective because they don't have those same fears and those same limiting beliefs because they've already done it. So once you start to surround yourself and align yourself with people like that, you know, your limiting beliefs start to remove themselves and you start to expand your own belief system that what can be done and what can't be done. And so, you know, I'll tell you a quick story. So when I left I was leaving the law firm, I experienced that. I was talking to someone I knew, successful guy in his own line of business. And, I was looking for office space. I was going to sublease out of his office. And I was telling him what I was doing. And, you know, he's in real estate and, you know, very successful. He had a lending company. And he's like, oh, that's what you're trying to do? You want to start flipping houses? It's like, listen, man, that's a really hard business to get into. I tried it once. I lost money. It didn't work. It's like, I don't recommend you do it. Why don't you come over here and, you know, work together and let's do, like, basically he had his agenda to pull me into his business. And honestly, that day, I think it was like a weekend where I was like subleasing office space in his office. I moved out of the office and I removed myself from that position because I wanted to be surrounded by like-minded individuals. And I went and I found something else because you have to protect your mindset, you know, because if otherwise you let other people project their fears and limiting beliefs onto you, it's just going to keep you down, you know?
Well, you made a move there. Like that was a choice. That was a blatant choice that you said.
It was intentional. Yeah,
I don't want to be around
intention.
this.
Correct.
Yeah. And
you have to be intentional about things.
fear breeds fear. That's
Correct.
one of the things that you said on there. And, you know, why is that person instilling this fear upon you? Well, because they're afraid to do it themselves. And that's okay. That may be a position that's good for them in their lives. And they may have or may have not regrets in the future. If you want to go out there and get it and make money, you're going to have to take risk. And out of the hundreds of flips that I've done, I can count on one hand the ones that I've actually lost money.
Right.
And I can tell you the mistakes that I made along the way that caused me to lose money on those deals.
And those are all valuable lessons.
And, you know, I paid for it. I got a tax break. Amen. So I know that in jumping off the couch, going out there and doing it, you've got to get in your comfort zone. You've got to be willing to take a little bit more control, whether it's a self-directed IRA, whether it's taking some investment money and getting a fix and flip loan. The products are out there that they mitigate the risk. The money's available. If you're coming up with 10, 20% into a project, I mean, what are you really risking in an affordable market,
that's
right?
That's power leverage, right?
Yes.
So, and that's obviously a different conversation that's definitely worth having. But yeah, like you said, it's like you have to continue expanding your comfort zone. So you first have to get out of your comfort zone and then you create a new comfort zone. And again, just going back to my example, if I would have listened to that one guy, that was before I did my first deal.
Yeah.
I was in the process of negotiating my first deal, actually.
Yeah.
You know, since then now, fast forward, 10 years later, I've done hundreds of flips, bought and sold hundreds of properties, have a 8-figure portfolio right now, trying to hit hopefully 9-figure portfolio within the next 6 to 12 months. And I wouldn't have done any of that if I would have just listened to this one person. Right. So that's
choose your mentors wisely, right? So choose who you surround yourself with wisely. And of course, everyone has a goal. Everyone has an intention. So within that, you've got to figure out, what is your goal? What is your intention? I got into this business because I wanted to control my time. I didn't want anybody telling me where to be, what to do, who to be with, how to do it. I wanted to do it my way. And that's what caused me to make all the sacrifices, make the commitments, forego vacations, forego things that I wanted, material things, to invest and reinvest in myself and in my business. And it's been rewarding. It's been amazing. And it's all because of the choices that I've made and the people that I've surrounded myself with or mentored, or had as a mentor.
It's that temporary sacrifice for the big reward, the big picture reward. I mean, like us, like right now, we pretty much, we control our own destiny, our own, schedules, and travel when we want to travel and work out of whatever location we want to work out of. Right now, it's a Monday and we're just driving to go check out a property, like I said, that we just put in the contract 3 days ago on Friday over the weekend while we were basically like hanging out, working out at the sauna by the pool. Literally, we should have made a video of that, but that's what we got the property in the contract. Now we're going to go check it out. We spend the weekend with our families and now we're going to go see the property. So, it's about that, the freedom, right? Financial freedom is really more time freedom, because the other thing I always like to say is that, the price that you pay for something is not the actual money that you paid for it, is the amount of time it took you to make that money. That's really the price you're paying for anything.
And this isn't a get rich quick thing either. We weren't talking this way 10, 15 years back.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
These are things that over time, understanding trends, understanding how to leverage these assets. Because what happens is you can fix and flip some, but eventually you're going to probably want to start holding on to some of these assets. At that point, you can use these as pawns or as bishops or as knights. These assets are what's going to allow you that flexibility.
It's funny, cause like you said, there might be a couple deals here and there where maybe the profit wasn't what we thought it was going to be, or maybe we may even lost a little bit of money. I couldn't even tell you which specifically those deals were. But what I can tell you is the biggest regrets I have, and I can tell you exactly which deals, are the ones that I sold and made a ton of money on, but that I didn't actually keep. So my biggest regrets are all the properties that I didn't keep into the portfolio. And then that was another step in the evolution, which once I was successfully flipping all these houses, we were flipping at one point, 35, 40 houses a year.
Right.
I know that one year you guys did 70 or 80 that one year.
Yep. Post-flood in Louisiana.
Post-flood, yeah. And I swear my biggest regret is not keeping more of these properties that I sold. And so I started finally getting over that limiting belief, because then at the time I got used to the money and I was like, well, if I don't flip this house, that's one less paycheck I'm going to get. What am I going to do? Yeah, I'm going to have the property, but so I wasn't creating wealth. I was still being transactional.
Right.
And I was just thinking of the immediate, the immediate gratification of just getting a nice big paycheck or payday when I sold the property.
Yeah.
But I wasn't thinking long term, and then I had to then make another step in my growth and evolution to start thinking bigger picture and more creating wealth rather than just creating a high income. And that's when I started hanging on to a lot of these properties and using certain strategies and learning a different set of skills, a different set of funding strategies in order to be able to restructure and pay off that hard money loan, pay off my JV partners, pay off my investors, so that I could put it in my own personal portfolio with my wife and I. And right now we're now doing another sort of mindset shift where now, we started working on restructuring all of our assets and creating a family bank, family office bank with the, infinite banking structure and we've already been using, self-directed IRAs and HSAs and these things for a few years now, but now we're putting it all together and now creating more of, like I said, a legacy type structure for multiple generations, which is what it's all about. It starts with buying your first property.
Yes.
And then it's about creating, a legacy for your family, for your entire family, 3, 4, 5 generations down the line.
Yeah. And the recipe takes multiple ingredients, right? So one strategy and one way that I looked at it getting into real estate, we'll call it for the second time, we would do a couple flips, grab that capital and buy a rental. Do a couple flips, grab that capital and buy a rental. And we just kept doing that over and over until all the juice was squeezed out of that lemon. Then we had to shift. We had to look at, okay, how do we leverage these assets? What do we have to do with this so that we can have more capital? Hey, there's less opportunities for flips or the margins aren't there. Well, let's figure out how we can raise up some capital internally a lot of times to then go in and buy more investment properties. Well, what do we got to do now? We got to buy multifamilies because a single family rental is just not enough margin for our model. But we started with the SFRs and we started with predominantly
one
fix and
property.
flip.
Listen, I started with a wholesale deal. I couldn't even afford to buy the property, but I knew how to structure a contract. And on my first deal, it was a little condo in Miami worth, at the time, $180,000 was my ARV. I was able to get under contract for $100,000. I put $1,000 deposit, and I found someone willing to take it off my hands for $120,000.
Nice.
And he knew what he had to put into it, another $30,000 to fix it up, and then he had a $180,000 condo. So I was happy. I put $1,000 in 3 weeks. We closed. I transferred the property to him. I made $20,000. So I turned $1,000 into $20,000, right? He doubled his money when he rehabbed. This was back in 2015. I looked up the property the other day and it's worth $400,000 today.
Yeah.
and it was worth $180,000 at the time. And it's just like, well, if I would have, again, right? Like, if I would have read, hindsight's 2020, but if I would have had the resources, I would have kept it. I would have had a $400,000 property, basically, 4x, 400% return on the $100,000 that I initially had it under contract for. But I couldn't do that then, so I was happy with the 20. But again, it just takes that one deal.
Right. And you actually made that choice to flip the property because it was your option at the time.
It was the only option I had, and I needed the money, and I was transitioning. At that time, there was the equivalent of like almost 2 months worth of my paycheck, or more than 2 months of my net.
Right. And now you've put yourself...
my take-home salary,
Yeah. You've put yourself in a position where you have choices, right? So you can buy it, you can flip it, you can rehab it, and then you make money when you buy. So now that we've locked in this property, we'll call it essentially we've made the money, right? But now we can look at it and be like, hey, what's our best option? What's our highest and best use of our time?
Maybe we keep it, we rent it, or listen, someone wants to take it off our hands, we sell it. It's just now we have multiple exit strategies. That's what you mean when you're talking about options, right? So multiple exit strategies. And that's the other important thing is you can't just focus on one exit strategy only because, there's changes, the market shifts, there's different things happening. You have to, again, that comes with the education, the mentorship, learning different approaches, different strategies. So you make money when you buy because you're buying at the right place. And then that opens the doors for multiple exit strategies, which is what we're talking about here when it comes to options.
Absolutely.
So.